Okay, friends, it was a busy, busy day in court today. But first, before any witnesses were called to the stand, there was drama. 2 jurors have been released from the jury pool because they have tested positive for COVID. There was a lot of back and forth as to, should we all wear masks? What do we do now? How do we all keep from getting COVID? Blah, 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 blah. Ultimately, it was decided that 2 alternates would be put in place of the 2 jurors who are now off the case. Can they talk? Because I really want to hear what they think so far. And are they now following the remainder of this case on court TV? I'm about 90% sure that after this trial goes to verdict, that those jurors will be able to weigh in on court TV or NBC or wherever they want to weigh in. So it'll be really interesting to hear what they have to say. Also, OnStar, the people who track you when you're driving around and whatever. Before, the prosecution had said to them hey, GM, hey, OnStar, do you have any reports that tell us where this car was going, how fast it was going, blah, blah, blah. And OnStar was like, yeah, nah, dude, sorry, got nothing for you. Now, all of a sudden, we're 16 days into trial, or we're into this is beginning of either the 3rd or the 4th week. I think this is the 4th week. And OnStar's like, oh, yeah, hey, we have all that stuff you wanted before. Why they would not give it up before, I do not know. But suddenly and out of the blue, OnStar has entered the chat. Now, I don't know if this is going to extend the trial any longer. The trial seems to be taking forever, but OnStar will have some interesting information. Next up on the day was the DNA expert. There was a lot of chatter back and forth about this DNA expert. And honestly, I was bored to tears. There was all these probabilities and the this and the that and the slivers of the t-shirt. I could not have cared less. But some people feel like, oh no, this is where, honestly, I feel like if you want to believe that there's something hinky going on, then you could hang it all on this blood spatter expert. And there's a question of spatter versus splatter. One means blood, the other means other bodily fluids. I really don't care. Finally, to wrap up the day, the coroner who did the autopsies, it was not pretty stuff. It was so bad, in fact, that the judge gave the jury a break. So I'm going to break it down for you in probably the easiest way I can, because it's pretty doggone gruesome. This is what you need to know. Paul was shot first. He was shot from behind. The first shot was not significant enough to kill him. It was enough to stun him, but he turned around and then looked his killer in the face. And then after he looked his killer in the face, he was shot a second time in the back of his neck that exploded out of the top, I guess in the back of his shoulder. That bullet exploded out of the top of his head, killing him instantly and removing his brain from his body. There were pictures, very graphic pictures that thankfully were not shown to the whole wide world, but the jury saw them. I don't know what the jury was doing or what looks were on their face, but Judge Newman was like, we need to take a break. And so he gave the jury a 10-minute break. Paul was shot up close. All during the description of all the gunshots of both Paul and Maggie, Alec looked white as a sheet. You know how sometimes when you could just sort of put out of the back in the back of your mind all the terrible things you've done, and then you're confronted with it, with evidence and pictures. I imagine it was pretty startling for him to have to face in front of God and all the world what he has done. Or he's a total psychopath and he was just putting on a show. Probably a little bit of both. Now, Paul was shot very close range. That last shot was an execution shot, the one that he got in the shoulder. Oh, here's the other thing that we heard earlier before, but I had forgotten. And that is that after the first gunshot, Paul was still standing. He took a couple of steps before he received the fatal shot. Grim. Then as it relates to Maggie, she was shot with a different gun, as we already know. The first shot went through her kidneys or something like that. First, she was shot both in her legs, up close. One of the shots went through her abdomen, through her kidneys, which would have caused her a lot of pain, where she bent over. As she was bent over, she was shot 2 more times. Both of those shots were close up. The first of those 2 shots would have been fatal. The final shot was an execution style shot. These are things that for the most part we already knew. Here's something that came out long before this thing ever got to trial, and it really has stuck in my brain. Remember old cousin Eddie? Now, there's been all kinds of rumors about what Cousin Eddie knew and when he knew it. I have also heard tale that Alec supposedly confessed to Cousin Eddie and then tried to set Cousin Eddie up for the murders. Remember the roadside shooting, the staged suicide attempt or whatever it was? One of the attorneys said Poot said in court the other day that Alec did not have life insurance. If he did not have life insurance, then why was he trying to stage a suicide so Buster could get $10 million? If there's no life insurance, something in that milk ain't clean. I suspect that Alec was trying to set up Cousin Eddie for the murder of Paul and Maggie with the roadside shooting, and it all went left because shot or not shot, number one, Buster already had a trust. Number two, nobody has been able to find life insurance for Alec, $10 million or otherwise. So it's all very suspicious. The other thing was, shortly after the murders, when Cousin Eddie started getting named in it, well, Cousin Eddie went down to the jailhouse and he spilled his guts. He told all. And the story that he told about how Maggie and Paul were shot pretty much matched what we heard the coroner today say in court. How did Cousin Eddie have that information? Was he there? He talked about Paul being shot first. He talked about Maggie running away, falling to the ground, and then being shot again while she was on the ground. He even went so far as to mention that a bullet went through somewhere on the lower side of her body and came out the top of her head. That's the story Cousin Eddie was telling long before any of this took place, long before this got to trial. But the difference in Cousin Eddie's story was that he was saying it was C.B. Rowe doing the shooting, that Maggie and C.B. Rowe were having an affair. Paul was mad at C.B. Rowe, and that there was a confrontation between Paul and C.B., and that basically C.B. got the best of him. According to Cousin Eddie's story, that's why there was two guns. Paul had a shotgun that ended up being used against him, and then C.B. Rowe ran to his truck and got the AR and used that to shoot Maggie. Honey, I don't know what happened. Another thing we found out from forensics today, the bullets that killed Paul Murdaugh were loaded into the gun by Paul Murdaugh. That means that was a family weapon. So whoever, can you imagine a murderer coming to the scene, then going up and getting a gun that happened to be there to then kill the people he's there to kill? Paul had no defensive wounds. Paul did not have his hands up. Paul just basically turned around to see who had shot him the first time and just caused him an injury, not a fatal shot, that first shot, where he looked his killer in the eye and was then shot to death. Grim, gruesome stuff. Alec Murdaugh, I'm looking at you. Last but certainly not least, because today's trial was full of information and full of just like, I can't even imagine this being someone that I love, much less my child, my spouse. All of it was terrible. This is what I want to know. You know they're going to make like 65 movies about this, right? There have already been a plethora of documentaries. It is only a matter of time until the motion picture gets made. I think it's going to be like a movie of the week, a Netflix or something like that. 4 or 5 people are probably making movies. Who gets cast? Who gets cast to play Alec? Who gets cast to play Maggie, Paul? All the key players. Who gets cast? I don't think they can cast Mr. Magoo to play Poot Poot. So I haven't figured out who's going to play him yet. For Alec Murdaugh, which is going to be a fairly big role, obviously, I think Jeff Bridges. Like a clean shaven, pudgy, they're going to have Jeff eat a whole bunch of barbecue or something. I think Jeff Bridges is going to play Alec Murdaugh. Also, for Mark Tinsley, who they're calling Zero Dark Tinsley, because he don't have time for your mess, I think Benjamin Cumberbatch. I put these pictures someplace up. I think there's like a blog sort of section of YouTube. I put them in there. Who do you think is going to play who? There's a million tiny little roles, and I don't think they'll have big names for the other roles, but I think they may do a big name for Poot Poot. Obviously, they're going to do a big name for Alec. Paul and Maggie can be relatively minor characters unless they come back as ghosts or something. They can be nobodies, but my vote for lead, Jeff Bridges. Jeff, what you doing? Jeff, you better start eating some barbecue. Okay, y'all, I actually have to run to Target. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and I need a cute red outfit to wear. I have the pants, but I need a red shirt. So I'm going to go get myself a red shirt. You go get yourself some dinner, and you have a great night. I'll see you in the morning. Bye.